remember to raise your hand, okay, Elena? It helps so that we can call on everyone. All right. So it looks like our live streams are up and active. Abraham will probably be right back. His internet has been acting up. But welcome, everybody. We'll get started in a moment here. What happened, Abraham?
There's something on the screen and I pressed it and I think it kicked me out. I don't know why. That's what happens when you don't read.
Well, anyway.
Excuse me, Luis.
Yes, Elena?
I had to leave early at 7 because I had to be in bed at 7:30 because I cannot be on for that long.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Elena.
Yeah, because I had to go to bed every Tuesday at 7:30.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. And everyone else who is logged on now, thank you for logging on. We'll hopefully have a good discussion. Like I said, we'll wait maybe another couple more minutes. I see we have at least a couple more people logging on. In the meantime, I'm sure we can enjoy the cars, for those of you who can hear the music. Good to see you, Miss Lois. Eric, Zelda, Mojde, Alicia, of course, Julie.
Okay, I'm gonna.
How's it going, Miss Lois?
I say I'm gonna take you off film because I'm at my son's house.
Okay.
And I wanted him to see my class.
Okay.
I'm just gonna cut the camera off.
No worries.
Okay. Wait a minute. Camera's off.
He seems like a pretty cool guy.
Oh, he is nice. That's the CEO.
Oh, is that?
And then Abraham. That's Abraham up there. He's a cool breeze.
That's a
cool breeze. Yeah, that's my Abraham. I have my brother Louis and my brother Abraham.
A pleasure. Just in case, for anyone who didn't download the handout or wants to follow along with the handout, I did upload it right now to our chat.
Just took this. Oh, okay. Watch the for you? Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Yes, please.
And then anybody joining in on the live streams, you will gain access to the handout if you fully enroll using Google Classroom. You can always go to our website at dstlarts.org/Conchas y Café zine to fully enroll.
When I looked at it this afternoon, it was just like an introduction. I'm going to cut my camera off. I had to go to the hospital again. When you had your concussion, did you have those like somebody was shaking a sandbag in your head?
Well, with my concussion, it was a pretty strong headache.
Yeah.
I did get nausea eventually, and also I felt a little disoriented after a while. You know, I don't know if I would describe it as having like a sandbag on my head, but
no, it's like not on my head. It's like that noise that's inside go.
Kind of like a I don't really remember that specifically.
But anyway, I kind of like, I don't go in and out, but I get those moments of lightheadedness. So
Yeah.
But I did send you a paper today. Get it?
I did get an email from you, so yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try and catch up with some stuff. Okay.
Okay. Yes, Julie? Sorry, you're muted.
Can we all send Lois a healing vibe right now?
Yes.
I receive it in the name of the Lord.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
God bless you.
Yes. You are, of course, always in our hearts, Miss Lois.
Thank
We
you.
always wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you. And I the same for you, all of you. That's why I wanted my son to see you guys. His name is Eduardo, and he speaks Spanish. I don't. I know some words, but he speaks Spanish.
Right on, right on.
I speak how do you say Spanish? English.
Spanglish.
My teacher used to laugh at me. Part English, part Spanish.
Right.
I wanted to speak so fluently because I was raised East LA, right? Estrada
Mhm.
Courts over there, Lorena Street School over there, that area, Roosevelt High,
Mhm.
Garfield High over in that area. And I saw these people getting on the bus and they couldn't speak English, and the people would treat them so bad. You go back to your country. You ought to learn how to speak English. And then
Yeah.
when they go into the hospital, the general hospital, no interpreter, and oh man, I would just it was overwhelming. So I tried, but my palate just wouldn't accept it.
Yeah.
But my son, he does speak it. So
That's
that's
good. That's good. Yeah. Well, um, you know, let me actually go ahead and get our recording started. Since this does kind of tie in with what the lesson will be tonight. So why don't I just go ahead and get that going? Give me a quick second here. You'll all see the little recording. All right. Welcome, everyone. For tonight's Conchas y Café lesson, we will be talking a little bit about basically some of the ramifications of human history, colonialism, displacement, a lot of those kinds of big words and big ideas. And as Miss Lois was just kind of sharing with her experience growing up in the East LA area and witnessing people being just outright racist and prejudiced against non-native English speakers and all of that. It's I think it's worth sharing at least that, even in my relative young age, I also experienced that. So I think that it's something that can obviously be seen and traced along through different eras in our history. And it's not something that has necessarily changed, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that we can't analyze it and maybe turn it into something that could be to our creative benefit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing our screen here. For everybody following along on the live stream, like I said earlier, you'll be able to actually access the handouts through our Google Class. And in order to be able to gain access to the Google Class, you just go to our website, distillarts.org/Conchas y Café zine. But as usual, as is customary, I like to start off our sessions with a quote of the week. And this quote comes from one of my personal favorite writers, Eduardo Galeano. Those of you who have been around in Conchas y Café for a while already probably know who he is. For those of you who are new to Eduardo Galeano's work, he was born on the 3rd of September in the year 1940, and he passed on the 13th of April in 2015. He was from Uruguay. He was a journalist, writer, and novelist, considered, among other things, global soccer's preeminent man of letters and a, quote, literary giant of the Latin American left. Eduardo Galeano tuvo una influencia muy grande en toda Latinoamérica. Y pues, como ven aquí, él se cita diciendo, quien escribe, teje. Texto proviene del latín textum, que significa tejido. Con hilos de palabras vamos diciendo, con hilos de tiempo vamos viviendo. Los textos son como nosotros, tejidos que andan. And in English, I translated it more or less as, he who writes sows. Text comes from the Latin textum, which means textile. With strings of words, we go about speaking. With strings of time, we go about living. All text is like us, textiles that move. So, what does this quote say to you, my friends? ¿Cómo les parece esta cita? What is something that stands out about this for you? Feel free to
Okay,
jump.
I'll say something.
Sure.
Working downtown Los Angeles, and we used to go behind the textile buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and we would get the scraps and take them home and sew them, make things out of them. And to me, and I do like to sew now when I can, sewing is a continuous, like knitting. You know, I mean, it's without ending. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it continues. It just goes. I mean, what can I say? It just continues. It's like a family ties. You know, generations. You know, it just keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
So,
if it makes sense, but you
so
know.
would you say then, Miss Lois, just to kind of clarify for myself, would you say that this quote is talking about the longevity of things?
Yeah. A continuance.
Yeah, continuation of things. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I saw a hand from Abraham and then Julie.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Basically, it's telling me, a string comes from the past and then keeps on unwinding until we get into today when we're doing the next turn, right? Like you're weaving, but it's also not just your past, but it's also the other fibers that you are connecting with. So it's changing the entire piece of fabric. If you think about the larger picture, is your string is being connected with all those other fabrics. It becomes this huge thing that we call, I guess, in this case, language.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that, it's like a union, right? That continues of different lines or of strings, right? Julie?
When I first read about this, I immediately thought about this book I read called Zeros and Ones. And it was based on the beginning of the computer. And it told a story of women as weavers and how they use X's and O's to create their textiles. And they basically, that was the beginning of the computer, is these textiles or tapestries, which is also connected to language, symbols, math. They're all sort of intertwined, and it's all about communication. So I was just thinking about how, words and textiles are so closely aligned through textiles. I mean, it's really amazing.
I never would have thought about that now that you mentioned it. I remember when years ago I was going to I think it was at Trade Tech over there in Washington, LA, Los Angeles. And you talked about the computers, and that was before the computers came out. And they were showing us how the Orientals, the Asians, do the little marble county, and then somehow that developed into, I can't remember about that. That was years ago. I'm just telling my age.
Abacus.
But
Abacus.
yeah, we was doing the marble thing, and then we did it. We did the mathematic, and then it went into the computers. I don't remember how they did that, but you brought that back to a little recall. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I believe Julie said it's the abacus, and Zelda also concurred, I believe. Yeah, and Zelda in the chat also added, yes, like knitting, one takes threads, material in one form and creates something new, creating new forms or transition. A texture is equal to tactile, 3D, visceral, and real, makes the abstract real, alive, and breathing. Mojde in the chat also added, the strings of words can be as beautiful and colorful as textiles. Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. And then Alicia added also, those who write weave text and time through language and story or history. Therefore, it's passed down. Yeah, I think everyone is kind of hitting on a very similar idea here, in that textiles themselves, the physical object, that could be a tool for storytelling, and it can be a tool for also recording data. Just actually yesterday, as I was working on this handout, I learned about the quipu. Not sure if anyone here might be familiar with that, but the quipu is it's actually a device or a tool that was used by the people of the Incan Empire, the ancient Mesoamericans. And the quipu was basically a long string that on it was tied a couple of pieces of string as well. And then those strings used knots to indicate either a number, or it is also believed now that it also was used to track lineages, so families. It was something that was used for census, and keeping count of all of the people that inhabited the Incan Empire. It was also a tool that was used as an accounting tool to see, who owned what and where and how many. So it was a tool that was based entirely on threads. And it's still something that, because of colonialism and its, legacy in Latin America, it's something that it sort of has been forgotten, at least the interpretation of it. The quipu no longer has the people who are able to interpret it for us, as the Spaniards destroyed the texts ultimately of the ancient Incan Empire. The skill of interpretation has been lost, and a form of language has now been lost. Much like Julie was saying about, it was a binary system, a type of system that allowed for calculation, data collection, all sorts of different things, including people's names. So sort of coincidental in some ways, or maybe not, but I find that this particular quote is really interesting, and it was something that I was using even before I learned about the quipu. So there's definitely something to this concept of all of us being a type of textile. All of us are bound to one another, whether it be through our personal lineage, our historical lineage. There's just a lot of ways in which we can interpret this text, this particular string of words that we're trying to absorb. So River added in the chat, that feels soothing to think of oneself as a type of textile. And Eric added also, like sewing, speaking, and living, we all change in movement through time. Yeah, for sure. And then, if you get into like the other, like, theoretical physics, and we think about, like uh the the weaving or the texture, the textile that is the universe and our existence, string theory, exactly. Thank you, Julie. There's definitely a lot of different ways in which we can start to really get deep with this.
Well, I was thinking, and I don't know how closely related it could be, but when my great grandmother, and I remember my great grandmother, they used to do the quilts,
Mm-hmm.
and they would put in different the names, and this one was born there, and that one had this, that, or the other, and this one married that one, and every piece would represent something.
Yeah.
And it would, I mean, it could grow as large as a floor, and even more so as long as the linkage. Well, the generations went on. Yeah,
Yeah.
but, they had to stop somewhere, but that was a form of just moving forward. Just, I mean, one thing developing another. It doesn't have an end, no ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to us to let it go continually, or we cut it off. It's up to us. That what you were saying about that placement. What was that statement about the placement?
You
Our
mean
theme, our theme.
being out of place?
Yeah, that's something you said, but that wasn't exactly the words. But yeah, we have the power, whether we know it or not,
Mm-hmm.
to help it to continue to strive,
Mm-hmm.
or we can cut it.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad though, because like you say, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, because I'm just babbling right now, but domino effect. A lot of our young people don't acknowledge the Lord as the older ones, because each generation has a generation at a young age, and
Mm-hmm.
their lack of knowledge and the lack of how do you say, possibilities of giving the information to the one beneath them or comes after them, and it gets less and less and less and less. So yeah, we have that. Oh man, it's really sad that we can't continue that which has been started, and it's so important to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's sad. That's sad. And I can say that because my oldest daughter, who is 61, had my granddaughter at 16 or 17, and my granddaughter, and it went on down the line, and now I'm a great grandma. But those
Mm-hmm.
things happen, and so the less education on a certain subject or issue or situation, each generation
Mm-hmm.
is shortened. I mean, it's like cheated out of it.
Yeah, potentially. I think, there's something, definitely something to be said about, the way that certain, we'll call them habits, or maybe certain traditions, or certain customs, they might change and evolve over time. And to kind of go back to your uh observation of like the quilt making as an example, from the little bit that I know about the history of quilting, it was in some areas a way to preserve the history of a family, because every family is ultimately like a patchwork of different communities, different people, different families coming together to form one bigger one, right?
Yes.
And if we also kind of go with the metaphor of the string, maybe some strings have to end in order for a new string to be attached. And if we think of it as, maybe this is now a reinforcement, or this is maybe the changing of the color, in a larger loom, these are different ways in which we can at least track a certain kind of progress in
Oh,
our personal evolution as people, as human beings. So we're going to kind of stick with this theme for today's session in talking about like strings and textiles and that kind of thing as a metaphor for us as a human race. So to sort of prep you for the homework, I have a couple of questions, a few little exercises here that I'd like you all to take a moment to answer. The first one is, what are the strings that comprise your textile? If you, as Eduardo Galeano says, are a moving textile, then what are the strings that make up your textile? Define their texture, their color, how long they are, and the purpose that they serve within your tapestry. Okay, so take a quick second here, write these things down. You can do it on a separate sheet of paper. You can also add them to the chat if you want to. Since you will be referencing these later, I do recommend that you write them down though on a piece of paper that you can have handy. So, or if you're on your computer, obviously, you can also do it on a separate document. So, ¿qué son los hilos que forman su tejido? Define sus texturas, colores, medidas y propósito en el tejido que eres tú. Are some of the strings coarse? Are some of them smooth, like a fishing line? Or do they feel like yarn, kind of puffy, kind of loose? Is it all one color? Is it multiple colors? Are the colors complementary? I like River's response there. I'm a Brillo pad and chicken feathers with maybe some random ragged silk. Very descriptive. Just in case for anyone that didn't get the handout earlier, I just added it to our chat as well, so you can follow along there too. All right. So if you're done, or if you're still thinking about the textures and colors and lengths and the purpose of all those threads, continue writing and begin adding now. How would you define a knot in your strings? ¿Cómo definiría un nudo en sus hilos? What type of knot is it? Where is it in your string or strings? What purpose does it serve? What impact does it have on the tapestry of your being? ¿Qué tipo de nudo es? ¿Por dónde se encuentra o encuentran si hay más de uno en sus hilos? ¿Qué uso tiene? ¿Cuál es su impacto en el tejido de su ser? Nice. I like that, Zelda. I'm as smooth as silk with tufts of cotton every 2 centimeters. I'm the Gordian knot, intractable, unknowable, unbroken, unraveled. Great reference. Is it a knot that might be used for maybe camping? Is it a nautical knot? Is it a figure 8 knot? Is it a double knot? Is it the type of knot that you do by making the little rabbit ears and you cross the little rabbit ears? And more importantly, what does it serve? What is its purpose? What does it do for you? How does it affect the overall tapestry of who you are? Julie has added, I am soft purple and puffy with a hard wire inside. The length is my height a little longer. It helps me avoid injury, but there is always someone that finds my inner core, then sends an electric shock through my soul. I love it. You guys are already starting to get very poetic on me. Que venga la poesía. I like what Angie just added. Angie says, I'm silly string. Are the knots in your tapestry similar to the knots of the quipu? Do they collect data? Are they meant to be read by only a few people? Again, what purpose do these knots serve? Y para seguirle, si la historia humana es como un hilo, ¿en cuáles puntos del tiempo existen los nudos? ¿Existiría un patrón de nudos? ¿Será que los nudos forman lazos, agujeros o arreglos? ¿Quién o qué hace los nudos? If human history is like a string, at what point or points in time do knots exist? Do these knots have a pattern? Do knots create loops, tears, or repairs? Who or what creates the knots? We have a little addition here from Zelda. I'm a velvet cord finished with a silver bell. Pull on it, ring, and I'll come running. Humans tie themselves in knots trying to be free. Mojde wrote, the white string of my mind tangled with my red and blue string of my heart and soul, tied up with minds, hearts, and souls of many time to time. And Abraham added, strong ancient fibers try to bend the tip to a predestined direction, yet my fiber fights with every fiber to go where I want to go. My string is the color of orange and red, a fiber on fire turning into golden light, knots on my throat form, and yet I speak my mind for a string that knows where it wants to go. Can't be bent. Nice. Are the knots that exist in human history similar to the knots that are part of your tapestry? ¿Será que los nudos de la historia humana son idénticos o similares a los nudos que existen en el tejido que forma su ser? And I have one last question here for everyone to consider. What force brings all of these strings together? Describe this force, this mystical loom. Y la última pregunta que tengo para ustedes es, ¿qué fuerza es la que une a tantos hilos? Describe esta fuerza, este telar místico. I like this last little addition from Zelda in the chat. I'm a knot, the necessary but accidental bump in the road that slows you down. I don't think I can fit all 4 questions. Well, yeah, it's close enough, I think. So all 4 questions are on the screen now, or at least they should be. I'll give everyone maybe like another 2 minutes to try and answer as much as you can. Don't feel like you have to have all of it laid out yet. But do try to keep track of all the things you've written so far. We have from Zelda, the force is the tapestry of weft and warp, ties us all together. Pull, a string and all things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Sounds like a very delicate thing we are. River added, I'm the knot that you tie when you've finished sewing something, but it's not big enough so the thread slips through. But it's okay because you'll tie it to another thread and sew back over to try again. I like it. Y les digo otra vez que no se sientan presionados al terminar estas respuestas. En este momento es solo para formar ideas. Ooh, that's a good one. I had to navigate the knots that were put upon me. I like how that sounds. Navigate is such a good word for that. All right, so hopefully this gave you some ideas, some thoughts. And I'd like to revisit the quote one more time. now that we've had this little discussion and, looking at the quote again, it reads again one more time from Eduardo Galeano. He who writes sows. Text comes from the Latin textum, which means textile. With strings of words, we go about speaking. With strings of time, we go about living. All text is like us, textiles that move. Quien escribe teje. Texto proviene del latín textum, que significa tejido. Con hilos de palabras vamos diciendo, con hilos de tiempo vamos viviendo. Los textos son como nosotros, tejidos que andan. So looking at this quote one more time, how is your mind assimilating this quote now? What are you thinking now that you've started to metaphorically embody your own textile? Do you now have a different point of view after the discussion or after all this writing? And this is open to anybody who would like to answer that question for us.
You mean of our own writings?
Yeah, of your own writing or
Okay.
response.
Okay, this one I'm gonna try and make it quick though, because I how do you say, typed it in my phone.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I hope it makes sense. Okay, classwork, my textile string. Okay, my textile string of inheritance, motivated by the colors of red, gold, but unwoven background of bitterness, displaced and on call for cruel treatment that develops strengths, a desire to be a light for those who had similar darkness of tracking, a brightness of helping my brother or sister to weather their storm. Every acquaintance, old and new, considered as my prima or primo. Love helps my string to continue. One might go astray. Who wants to be free, but the string does not end. It just makes way for another string to become part of the woven path of those who are determined to go forth and forever forward, recalling or remembering those things that some people consider as a knot, but as in all ropes, streams, we learn to reach beyond and above the knot as not to be hindered, keeping a made-up mind to focus, the special made string that's not made by the hand of man, the spiritual strain that cannot be touched by human force. And that's the end.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Lois.
You're welcome.
I really like that image of, or the line of the string does not end. It just makes way for another one to begin.
You gave that to us. I put patriot. How you say patriot? What's that word?
Plagiarized.
Yeah.
Well, it's out in the world, so it's a, what was it called? A Creative Commons.
Okay.
So you have my permission to
Thank you.
Yeah. I also really like what Angie just added in the chat as well. Looking at life from this point of view makes me feel like though we may run into the feeling of not fitting, those knots really show that we are meant to be here too. Yeah, I really like that. Because yeah, I mean, in the end, the theme of this particular series of Conchas y Café is out of place, right? And I believe that all of us at some point in our life experience something that makes us feel out of place. That could be looked at in a lot of different ways. But in the end, if we look at like the larger global picture, we're not the only ones that feel that way. We're actually part of a bigger history where, everything has a knot, right? And the tapestry of human life is, full of different colors, different knots, tears, repairs, all sorts of different things that ultimately, just like Angie said, it means that we are actually meant to be here. wherever here is. So, I think that we can at least find some sort of maybe peace in that. But it doesn't mean we have to also accept the terrors, and all the different things that have happened, right? We can learn from them, I think, so that we don't repeat them. At least I hope not. Any other thoughts or any new interpretations of the quote from this week? ¿Hay algo nuevo que se les ocurrió al hacer este ejercicio? No. All
Here I
right.
go again. uh, I'm by listening to all of you, I'm learning more about this description that textiles can play into a mortal's life, but leaning more toward that displacement in life itself. Just being, how do you say, from that background of so much malice, hate, evilness because of one's skin color. Most of you have seen me, and I'm the darkest in my family, and even my own family. I mean, they took after more of the Indian side than I did. I don't care. But growing up, I had a very, very hard time, and it was crazy. So that my son and I, we were talking about it today and yesterday, and he says, "Mom," he says, "you still have some of those nuts," because of when people say that you're not this, you're not that, you're never going to be this, that, or the other, and it keeps you kind of like. I had a Spanish girlfriend. Her name was Veronica. They used to call her Mousy. It makes you feel kind of mousy. Makes you feel like, you shrug yourself. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it took a while for me to blossom. And he says I still have some tendencies of not allowing my inner strengths to be exposed or to, let them flow.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you would see that even now in your life, and I think it's actually fairly normal. It's unfortunate, but it is normal. I mean, those are all the things that we all carry with us, and I appreciate you sharing that, Miss Lois. I appreciate the vulnerability in admitting that, because for some people it's very hard to admit things like that. But the good thing is, that we're at least able to recognize them when we can, and we can do something about it. So thank you. We have a hand raised also from Zelda.
There. So you were asking, is there anything else that comes to mind with this quote and the notion of textile? And I think what came to mind to me was the notion of covering oneself. We've been talking about tapestry, which is often a sacred piece, which is hung on the wall because it's so delicate and cannot, needs to be preserved. There's also the notion of textile, of clothing and covering oneself, protecting oneself from the elements. And my mind wandered from there to the notion of us being one big tapestry responsible for the planet, and how we might protect the planet and questions of sustainability. So that's where my mind is drifting when you ask that question.
Very notable.
Yeah, I think that's that does tie into, I think, a lot of the ways in which we can interpret the purpose of text, the purpose of us trying to use some form of communication where communication can help us preserve, and it can help us continue stories, and it can help us do so many different things. And textiles as a form of communication could potentially play a role in that, in the same way that we might use like prayer as a form of spiritual protection. The word itself can be also maybe a form of, I don't know, physical protection if it helps de-escalate, or I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ways in which we can start to sort of connect this as a metaphor, right, for just existing. So I appreciate the different interpretations and the ways in which everyone's minds seem to be working in making different connections. So thank you, Zelda. Yeah. Abraham?
Well, it's just the kind of the quick one that changed while hearing everybody is like can see this as tapestry, like, or a big piece that involves a lot of people, like a culture to make a piece, right? Like a larger piece. Or to think you as all the materials, the types of strings and colors, and what you end up as a piece yourself. So it's either the culture itself as a larger piece, or one small piece that's who you're gonna become a rug, a sweater, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that is another way of interpreting it, right? The functionality of our tejido. What purpose is our unique story going to serve?
Yeah.
Because different types of textiles serve different purposes.
Yeah.
So.
And Miss Zelda was saying what she said, and then when my brother Abraham came on, that reminds me of how the elders of each family, how the Indians, Native Americans had their leader, and then the grandmas and the grandpas of other cultures, were the leaders of the family. They were that tapestry. And some still are, in some of our foreign countries, native lands over there somewhere.
Yeah, there's so many different things that I mean, just speaking from like a metaphor point of view, like I said, textiles can serve so many different purposes, from the very real and tangible to the spiritual and so much more. So because we are talking about text as a form of textile, right? It's or at least in the words of Eduardo Galeano, with strings of words we go about speaking. Con hilos de palabras vamos diciendo, con hilos de tiempo vamos viviendo. There's ways in which we can begin to also be a little more deliberate in the way in which we present our words. And being that this is, of course, a poetry class, we have a couple of key words here, or vocabulary words, techniques, so to speak, that I like to review on occasion. A lot of you are already familiar with these things, but it always serves, I think, a bigger purpose to be reminded of how they look and how they function in poetry, especially because we're going to start talking about the craft of weaving words together. But the line break, right? That's probably the most basic way of understanding the way in which we form a verse, we'll call it. Un verso, un renglón de poesía tiene su punto a donde termina. That last basic word, we'll call it, of a line of poetry. That is the line break. Here in the example, we have the word strings followed by the comma. And that is as simple as you see there, line break, right? Knots tie temporal strings, enclosing errant fibers, forming perpetual karmatic time loops. So each line has its point where it stops. That is a line break. Now, enjambment is a more creative way of approaching a line break. An enjambment, and those of you who know me know this is one of my favorite tools to use in poetry. It's the running on of a thought from one line couplet, or stanza to the next without a syntactical break. So this is really important, without the syntax breaking. So if we think of grammar, right, and we think of the way that we write sentences, there's always that sort of subject, verb, predicate kind of structure. What an enjambment does is it purposely breaks a line so that the reader either feels compelled to move forward into the poem, so that they get kind of like a resolution. But at the same time, the reader will also kind of be forced to stop and consider what is being read first. So it has this sort of dual purpose kind of thing going on. Encabalgamiento, aquí definitivamente es uno de las técnicas que a mí me gusta usar más en mi poesía, y es porque es algo que se hace con un propósito simple: reforzar ideas o imágenes en los renglones de poesía. To me, an enjambment is purely about reinforcing images or ideas within your poem. You can almost think of it as creating miniature poems within a larger poem. So in the example you'll see here, it's the same exact thing that's written up here, exactly the same. There is no difference. The thing that you will notice, though, is that the words now are purposely split up, right? So the enjambment now reads: knots tie, temporal strings enclosing, errant fibers forming, perpetual chromatic time loops. It might be a little more difficult to get from just this particular, I guess, line of poetry. But when you start reading, you'll start kind of slowing down a little bit with an enjambment. That is one of the effects that I particularly like about enjambment. So you end up with these kind of juxtapositions, really, that either reinforce an idea, reinforce an image, or create something that isn't really what you would have thought would have been there to begin with. Question in the chat is, could I talk about using punctuation with enjambment? I never know when to use capitals to emphasize, I'm assuming, etc., etc. So the way that I like to think of punctuation, especially things like commas, semicolons, or periods, they're ultimately there to help create a pause. So if you end a line with punctuation, it's always good to read that as an extended pause. It's telling you to slow down before moving on to the next line. But also, when you look at the larger sentence of a piece of poetry, of a stanza, it's there to also provide you with a little bit of grammatical structure, right? The way that the comma is used here, it's sort of used as a way to reinforce the line before it. Knots tie temporal strings, enclosing errant fibers. So that's supporting the first line. Then the second comma is letting us know that there's going to be now a resolution to the sentence. It's like a compound sentence that's happening, forming perpetual chromatic time loops. So it kind of quantifies, I guess, the rest of the sentence there. Now, in enjambment, you have the option, I guess you could say, of using the same punctuation, but now in a more strategic way, so that you're telling people to pause inside of a line. And that pausing inside of a line could be used as a form of caesura, which is a different poetry technique. It's something that you can create kind of like as a rhythmic pause inside of a line of poetry. So what this does, especially with enjambment, is that it creates that sense of, okay, I need to pause and interpret or digest what I just read before continuing. Meanwhile, the end, because there's no no punctuation there, they theoretically could force a person to move on to the next line. And that's really the purpose of an enjambment, is to force the reader to move on to the next line without breaking the syntax of the sentence. I don't know if that makes sense. A lot of this is theoretical, so it comes down to style, and if it's more, your style to add these little pops of emphasis using capital letters, using, pauses, then, that's something that you will eventually develop as you develop your voice. But capitalization is something that I personally think works if it denotes the beginning of a sentence. I don't normally like to capitalize the first letter of a line of poetry because it sort of loses the impact of a capitalization. Capitalization works really well to help either add emphasis or to just let a person know that this is the idea of X, Y, and Z, as opposed to just, I don't know, like it's kind of like the difference between capital G God and lowercase g God, right? Capital G God usually is understood to mean the Christian God, whereas a capital G God is something that is outside ultimately of that Christian what is it called, hegemony. So doesn't mean that it's incorrect or wrong, it just means that it's just a different way of interpreting, or emphasizing the placement of that God within society. So I hope that makes sense. All right.
Yes, I think so. I think it's very much what, like you said, it's as you develop your voice, you can test these things to see. So for example, if I say knots tie, and then I have the capital T temporal strings, it would be knots tie temporal strings as opposed to knots tie temporal strings, I think.
Yeah.
But it definitely creates another rhythm to it. And I, initially I've been playing with enjambment also because I really love that form, but I always felt tempted to add the capital letter on the next line without really thinking through how that would affect the pattern and the rhythm.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it too, because poetry is not just sonic, it's not just an oral form, it's also a visual form. When people read it on the page, they don't always have the benefit of you there to perform it for them, so they won't really know where you're emphasizing if you're capitalizing every single line at the beginning. So you can be strategic about using the visual elements of language to then help a reader know where your rhythm is meant to go and where your emphasis is meant to go. So it does kind of come down to voice and performance to a certain degree, and then also just what feels right for you, because what works for me as a poet may not work for you as a poet. Your voice is going to be equally as unique as anyone else's, and that's okay. So and then of course juxtaposition, that's the last one that you could kind of call a use of line break, right? It's a very specific way of constructing your lines so that you have a little bit of tension kind of created between words that maybe go together or maybe don't go together. Juxtaposition is, I think, a bigger concept than what I'm able to show here, but excuse me, but it is something that you can also just kind of consider as being one of the main tools when it comes to creating line breaks that are very deliberate. So and in this case, you can see here, right, again, I moved around some of the words this time to take advantage of some of the alliteration. So tie temporal, and then fibers forming. So, again, it's just different approach to essentially the same problem. How am I going to create a rhythm that adds an emphasis where I want it? So, yeah. And then again, with the punctuation, it's in my particular style, it's just a way of indicating pauses while also using it in a most of the time correct grammatical way too. So, yeah. All right. So we're going to put this into practice just a little bit. So referencing some of the answers that you used earlier for the questions, I'd like you to write a 4-line stanza that uses either some of the lines, the complete lines, or select words from your answers to the previous questions, and try to use one of the 3 things, either juxtaposition, enjambment, or just a basic line break. So this is
you want a total of 4 lines with the 2 examples.
One
example.
Yeah, one example of the 3 things that I covered. So
every time I think about the enjambment, makes me think about Michelle Smith.
Yeah, she knows. I've talked to her about that a lot. So yeah. Pero sí, la práctica en el momento es escribe una estrofa de 4 líneas que usa palabras selectas de sus respuestas a las previas preguntas, incorporando en la estrofa una de las 3 técnicas de salto de línea. So you can revisit anything that you already wrote. If you wrote it in the chat, you could probably find it if you scroll back up in the chat. But yeah, try to apply either an enjambment, try to apply a juxtaposition, try to apply your understanding of a line break.
This is homework, right?
This is a little exercise for right now.
Oh.
This isn't the complete homework. Not yet.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to leave a little bit early today. Only maybe about 3 minutes.
All righty.
For the pre-broadcasting.
All right.
Okie dokie.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna give y'all like another 2 minutes.
Oh man.
Put this into practice, and then we'll go into the poem for tonight. Thank you, Abraham, for the text version of the TikTok. Here, I'll show the 3 things again. So line break.
Not to be hindered.
Enjambment. And juxtaposition. Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it. Mojde added in the chat. Fear, to be and love, do and undo the string of my life, the white string of my mind, tangled with my red and blue, string of my heart and soul, tied up with minds, hearts, and souls of many time to time. And I'm trying to read them with the line breaks so that way you can hopefully get a sense of how it might sound. River added also, chicken feathers barb, me, attack them proudly to my cork. I roll in, silk dust, then slither home. Oof, that's good. Those are some good enjambments right there.
Do stay focused.
Sorry. I'll give everyone 1 more minute here. And again, don't feel like you have to be done at this moment. Right. In the chat, Zelda added, I'm as smooth as silk, woven and trussed with tufts of cotton. Nice, nice. Eric added in the chat, reinforced threads of finely woven Spider-Man silk, iridescent and bioluminescent, of indefinite length, its colors for camouflage. Love that. Good use of internal rhyme with iridescent and bioluminescent. For me, 10,000 strings reach out.
Beyond and above the knot.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. So for the sake of time, we'll move on to the poem. I love that everyone is continuing to share in the chat. Zelda added, I'm the Gordian knot, intractable and unknowable, unbroken. And Julie continued, each with a knot of love, hate, lust. I am eternally entangled in the knots. I like it.
Sorry for the typos.
That's okay. All
Beyond
right.
above the knots.
Yeah. So for tonight's poem, to kind of just reinforce the use of enjambment in particular, I've selected Pablo Neruda. For those of you that know, aside from Eduardo Galeano, Pablo Neruda is also one of my favorite writers. This particular poem is called Tierras Ofendidas, and it comes from his book Residencia en la Tierra, Offended Lands, and it comes from Residence on Earth. The Spanish is obviously the original, and then I have a translation here that was done by Donald D. Walsh. So that is who we are reading for tonight. To give my voice a rest, who would like to read either the English or the Spanish for us tonight?
I'd be happy to read the Spanish.
Sure.
Okay.
You're ready? You can go for it now, River.
Okay. Tierras ofendidas. Pablo Neruda, de Residencia en la Tierra. Regiones sumergidas en el interminable martirio por el inacabable silencio, pulsos de abeja y roca exterminada. Tierras que en vez de trigo y trevo traéis señal de sangre seca y crimen. Caudalosa Galicia, pura como la lluvia, salada para siempre por las lágrimas. Extremadura, en cuya orilla gusta de cielo, my cursor, de cielo y aluminio, negro como agujero de bala, traicionada y herido y destrozado. Badajoz sin memoria, entre sus hijos muertos, yace mirando un cielo que recuerda. Málaga, arrada por la muerte y perseguida entre los precipicios, hasta que las enloquecidas mares azotaban la tierra con sus recién nacidos. Furor, vuelo de luto y muerte y cólera, hasta que ya las lágrimas y el duelo reunidos, hasta que las palabras y el desmayo y la ira no son sino un montón de huesos en un camino y una piedra enterrada por el polvo. Es tanta tumba, tanto martirio, tanto galope de bestias en la estrella. Nada, ni la victoria, borrará el el agujero terrible de la sangre. Nada, ni el mar, ni el paso de arena y tiempo, ni el geranio ardiendo sobre la sepultura.
Excellent job, River. Thank you. Very good. All right. And do we have a volunteer to read it for us in English?
I'll give it a
I'll
shot.
try. Oh,
we got Miss.
Luz. Hi, Luz.
Hi.
Gonna read English?
Yes. So Miss Luz will read it for us in English whenever you are ready, Miss Luz.
Thank you. Offended Lands, Pablo Neruda. Region submerged in an interminable martyrdom through the unending silence pulses of bee and exterminated rock. You lands that instead of wheat and clover bring signs of dried blood and crime. Abundant Galicia, pure as rain, made salty forever by tears. Extremadura, on whose august shore of sky and aluminum, black as a bullet, whole, betrayed and wounded and shattered. Badajoz, without memory, among her dead sons, she lies watching a sky that remembers. Malaga, plowed by death and pursued among the cliffs, until the maddened mothers beat upon the rock with their newborn sons. Furor, flight of mourning, and death and anger, until the tears and grief now gathered, until the words and the fainting and the anger are only a pile of bones in a road, and a stone buried by dust. It is so much, so many tombs, so much martyrdom, so much galloping of beasts in the star. Nothing, not even victory, will erase the terrible hollow of the blood. Nothing, neither the sea nor the passage of sand and time, nor the geranium flaming upon the grave.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Luz.
You're welcome.
Zelda says it actually sounds better in Espanol. I mean, to be fair, it was written originally in Spanish, but I do think that there are some very striking images in the English that we also see in the Spanish. So that's the beauty of a good translator, right? We are able to get more or less the same message as we might get in the original language. But speaking of images, because this is more about, seeing the reinforcement that enjambment does, how or what really stood out to you in this poem and why? What images, I should say, what images really stood out to you in this poem?
Can you scroll down?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think what was striking to me was this personification of these different parts. I'm assuming it's Spain because I recognize Malaga and there was Galicia. I don't really know Badajoz and Furor. I don't think it's a place, but anyway, the personification of these women mourning their sons was quite striking to me. Malaga, plowed by death, Badajoz, among her dead sons. Somebody was beating, I think it's further off, beat upon the rock with their newborn sons. It's very violent. The idea of a mother beating her children to death. That is what is striking to me.
Yeah. Julie?
Yeah, I totally agree with Zelda on that violence there, but I was going to mention neither the sea nor the passage of sand and time. You know, I just when he says sand and time, you immediately see a timer that you flip over, and what do you call those things?
Yeah, an hourglass. Yeah.
Hourglass, yeah. And and he's not saying an hourglass, but he uses these words to describe an hourglass. And I love that he did that. Like, he was able to like describe something, and then immediately I get the vision without saying the word.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think that it was a very clever in that particular stanza. It's very clever because he's invoking the sea, right? And what is next to the sea? Well, a sandy beach, usually, right? So not only are we getting the dual imagery of the beach, but we're also getting the imagery of an hourglass, which is commonly filled with sand. So there is a very clever thing that's happening there, by creating this very subtle juxtaposition within the enjambment. So yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, Julie. We also have a hand up from River.
I think the most striking enjambment for me, probably because I love like the way words go in rhythm, is when he says, es tanto, tanta tumba, tanto martirio, tanto, galope de bestias en la estrella. I love how he just stops us at tanta after estanto, and then moves us to tumba, and then does it again. I'm not sure what I love about that, but when I got to that line, I was like, oh, I really like the way this is shaped and formed.
Yeah. That's, one of the benefits, obviously, of it being in its original language, right? We have the T repetition. So, that alliteration helps there for sure. It's not the same in the English, but we still, at least in the English, get the benefit of the enjambment, which I think this image by itself is a very, very strong image. The galloping of beasts in the star. Galope de bestias en la estrella. It is a pretty strong image to me. Yeah, Zelda added, it's the beating of the drum, a salsa or cumbia rhythm. Yeah. Julie? Oh, no. Okay.
Sorry, I'm lowering my hand. Sorry.
No problem. Anyone else? Any other specific things that stood out? I know Mojde also felt very strongly about the last stanza. Zelda?
Yes, I was wondering, do we know the context of this poem? Is it about the Spanish Civil War or?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Short answer is yes. Yeah, this poem came out sometime between 1935 and 1945, or at least that's when it was written. The book, Residencia en la Tierra, Residence on Earth, if I remember correctly, was actually published in 1957 originally. So this was published in this form at least several years after the Spanish Civil War. But yes, this is basically a commentary on the atrocities of that time period.
Well, to me, and I don't understand it all, but certain words and phrases, it reminds me of the song of Marvin Gaye, where he says that there's too many people dying and too many mothers crying. Yeah, and so this whole text here, it makes me saddened, and then the part that where I guess all of her sons have passed away, that reminds me of in the book of Ruth, when the lady lost her two sons. And then the youngest one, I guess she had another one, and she takes him, I guess, to the rocks where she, I guess, washes her clothes back in those days. I don't know. I'm just imagining. And then the reminiscing of her other lost older sons comes to mind, and she just beats, against a rock, So, I mean, it's sad. I have no idea what this piece is trying to untangle,
Yeah.
But it's sad.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection to make, because I wouldn't be surprised if Neruda did maybe draw from his understanding of the Bible to maybe pull up that image. Zelda, I saw that you had your hand raised. Did you have something to add as well, or?
Oh no, that's okay. That's okay. The thought passed. Yeah.
Okay.
Question.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to go.
Okay.
Can I pick my homework up on the monitor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we are coming to an end for tonight too. So I'll go ahead and share the homework with you. This week, your homework is to write a poem that uses the metaphor of knots and textiles to reflect on the patterns of human history, colonialism, and displacement. I'll add that also to our chat here, just in case. And also on our live stream for those who are following along on YouTube, Facebook, and I think Twitter is also up right now. Y su tarea en español es: escribe un poema que utiliza el metáfora de nudos y tejidos para reflexionar sobre los patrones de la historia humana, colonialismo y desplazamiento. I apologize for how heavy that is. But, all of you did a fantastic job making metaphor out of the concept of textiles and strings and knots and all of the things that we were talking about at the beginning. So I feel like you should be able to do this for this week. Also, because part of the reason why I did bring up this poem in particular, aside from Pablo Neruda being one of my favorite poets, and aside from it being a very strong example of how enjambment can function, this poem is also, again, about the Spanish Civil War, and it's like legacy on the lands where it happened. And there's a lot of things that are, in contemporary society and modern day history, that are in a lot of ways mimicking what has happened, I should say, in the past, right? And there's a very big repetition of human history happening. 100 years ago, around this same time period, we had the First World War, and we had Dadaist poets and artists who were reacting very strongly to the first time that civilians were being harmed, and the first time that chemical warfare was enacted, and a lot of different things that have become very recognized as just modern day war, right? Modern day combat. The Spanish Civil War is no different. The current wars that we see in the Middle East right now and in Ukraine, it's not really that different. So, going back to the concept of time and it being a string, and our text also functioning as a string, or a collection of strings that form a textile. We as poets have the ability to string words together in a way that have an impact, that speak to what it is to be human. And so ultimately, what I'm hoping you walk away with after tonight is kind of like the hope that we can make a difference with our words. We may not be able to always be out there in the front line. We may not always find that is the place for us, but for those of us that have a platform and who have the opportunity, we can speak to the things that we understand as essential to being human. So that's why I'm encouraging you to this week use the metaphor of textiles, knots, and all of that, to really talk about human nature and to talk about the fabric of humanity, because I feel like more and more that is what all of the big conversations go back to, is the fabric of who we are. So, yeah. Thank you. Did anyone have any questions? It makes me feel like we aren't tying enough knots in the fabric of time. Well, maybe. Or maybe we need to undo some, right? Knitting the notes. I like that much there. And yeah, I suppose you could also look at it as a juxtaposition of nature and war, as Alicia is pointing out in the chat. A lot of these things do go hand in hand. So I was going to offer to read the poem again one more time before we close out the session. But we have gone over by a couple of minutes. Y'all want me to read it for us one more time, or are we feeling good? All right.
If you read it in Spanish, okay.
All right.
I say read it in Spanish too. I vote for that.
All right. Well, I finish it in Spanish, but I'll also, for the sake of equity, I'll read it in English as well. Offended Lands by Pablo Neruda. Regions submerged in interminable martyrdom through the unending silence, pulses of bee and exterminated rock. You lands that instead of wheat and clover bring signs of dried blood and crime. Abundant Galicia, pure as rain, made salty forever by tears. Extremadura, on whose August shore of sky and aluminum, black as a bullet, whole, betrayed and wounded and shattered. Badajoz, without memory, among her dead sons, she lies watching a sky that remembers. Malaga, plowed by death and pursued among the cliffs until the maddened mothers beat upon the rock with their newborn sons. Furor, flight of mourning and death and anger, until the tears and grief now gathered, until the words and the fainting and the anger are only a pile of bones in a road and a stone buried by the dust. It is so much, so many tombs, so much martyrdom, so much galloping of beasts in the star. Nothing, not even victory, will erase the terrible hollow of the blood. Nothing, neither the sea nor the passage of sand and time, nor the geranium flaming upon the grave. Y en español les presento Tierras Ofendidas, de Pablo Neruda. Regiones sumergidas en el interminable martirio por el inacabable silencio, pulsos de abeja y roca exterminada, tierras que en vez de trigo y trébol traes señal de sangre seca y crimen. Caudalosa Galicia, pura como la lluvia, salada para siempre por las lágrimas. Extremadura, en cuya orilla augusta de cielo y aluminio, negro como agujero de bala, traicionado y herido y destrozado. Badajoz, sin memoria, entre sus hijos muertos yace mirando un cielo que recuerda. Málaga, arada por la muerte y perseguida entre los precipicios hasta que las enloquecidas madres azotaban la piedra con sus recién nacidos. Furor, vuelo de luto y muerte y cólera, hasta que ya las lágrimas y el duelo reunidos, hasta que las palabras y el desmayo y la ira no son sino un montón de huesos en un camino y una piedra enterrada por el polvo. Es tanto, tanta tumba, tanto martirio, tanto galope de bestias en la estrella, nada, ni la victoria borrará el agujero terrible de la sangre, nada, ni el mar, ni el paso de arena y tiempo, ni el geranio ardiendo sobre la sepultura. All right. So thank you, everyone. Aquí tienen de nuevo su tarea. I hope that you feel inspired by today's just general discussion about time and our metaphors that we all have within us. So again, next week we actually no, I was going to say next week we'll have a workshop, but I am actually wrong. Next week, being that it is Thanksgiving week, we are going to be taking the week off. So that means that you actually have 2 weeks this time to write your poems. And the Tuesday after Thanksgiving will be when we will give you the opportunity to share with your cohorts in class. So yeah, turkey party, as Abraham says. So enjoy your Turkey Day next week. For those of you that do celebrate it, I do hope that you have a restful time, and we'll see you all back again here 2 weeks from today. And for those who are watching the live stream, thank you for joining in. Again, if you want access to the handouts and to all of the other previous lessons, you just go to our website, dstilarts.org/Conchas y Café zine, fully enrolled to our Google class, and you will have access to all the materials that we have covered up to this point. And the deadline to submit final writing to potentially be published in the next issue of Conchas y Café zine is December 19th. That's Tuesday, December 19th. I'll start reminding all of you, and you are more than welcome to submit now as you finish off those pieces of writing. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will call it a night. I hope you all have a great, great week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, everyone.
Un placer, como siempre. Bye.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too.